This episode is brought to you by the American Reptile and Plant Expo. It's Colorado's biggest reptile and plant show. Colorado natives host the All-American Reptile and Plant Expo on September 7th and 8th at Douglas County Fairgrounds. Shop oddities, terrariums, reptiles, amphibians, invertebrates, and plants from Reptile Basics, Arcadia, Pangea, and more. Tickets for the All-American Reptile and Plant Expo are available on Eventbrite now. Plus, use code CITY for 10% off. For more details, visit denverreptileshow.com. That's denverreptileshow.com. Today on CityCast Denver. The venerable Michelin Guide is back. 1 year after distributing the first Colorado stars to a select few local restaurants, they're set to re-up their recommendations next week. So, who will gain a star? Who might lose one? And maybe, more importantly, why does this French tire company have so much sway on how we eat? Producer Paul Karolyi joins me and a special guest to dig into all the Michelin hype as we ponder, how much does this award matter to Denver? Today is Thursday, September 5th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. Jake Browne, welcome to CityCast Denver.
Thank you for having me.
And producer Paul Karolyi is also joining us. Hi, Paul.
Hey, Bree. I'm so glad to be here. We got a great topic.
Yeah, I think you two are perfect for this conversation. I am coming in as the dummy who doesn't understand any of this. But
that's so flattering. I feel like I'm along for the ride.
Paul, you're a foodie.
I'm a foodie.
You're a foodie, for sure.
Actually, there's a show called The Sporkful I've been listening for years.
Sure.
And he's like, it's not for foodies, it's for eaters. So and I've always felt like, yeah, that's me. That's more me.
You're an eater?
I'm an eater.
Jake, are you a foodie?
I don't even know what that term means anymore. I want to split the difference and be like, I'm a feeder, but that sounds totally wrong. I worked in fine dining for a long time and have always been an avid home chef, right? Like we were like early adopters of like sous vide, like a lot of the...
Paul, I think you're similar.
A little bit, yeah.
Are you a kitchen gadget guy?
I don't go for the gadgets. I've got a whole new adventure happening at my house right now where I was a vegetarian for 10 years.
Okay.
And now my wife and I have gone whole hog. By that I mean we bought a pig and have been slowly eating it.
Whole hog.
Yes, over the course of the year. We just did the liver a couple weeks ago, and that was not great. But it's been fun.
I love the veracity with which you dug in and were like, you know what, vegetarian for a decade, hog liver.
I know.
It's been a journey. It's been a journey for sure. That's a different show, though.
Well, yeah. What we're talking about today is the Michelin Guide, which will unveil its second Colorado edition soon. Meaning this is only the second year ever that restaurants in the state have been awarded these highly regarded stars at all. But some spots, like the place we're going to discuss, we'll find out if they keep the stars they received last year. But before we get started, Paul, for the uninitiated, can you explain why the Michelin star designation is so important?
Absolutely, I can. I mean, Jake lived it, but it's prestige is what it is. For like decades and decades, this was a famous tire company that made a road guide, and to be recognized as a restaurant in this road guide meant that you had something special going on at your restaurant. And so these were the places like world-class restaurants, Noma, Michelin stars. Recently, it's changed a little bit. Like the company Michelin has changed how they operate. Their business model is different. They think of themselves, according to this New York Times piece we talked about last year, as like less of a critic of the industry and more of a partner. But still, these stars carry a lot of weight for both diners, for food fans, and especially for chefs. Like the headline from the Denver Post last year after this restaurant, BRUTØ, downtown, we're going to talk about, won Michelin star, was 925 reservations in 36 hours.
Holy.
Which is a lot.
Sounds like a showing on a house in Denver.
Truly.
You know what I mean?
Where in Denver do you compete for a reservation? But these Michelin stars created that hype. And it was a special moment. They made a lot of money.
It's life-changing for these restaurants.
Jake, that's what I want to ask you, because you worked on the restaurant side of this whole experience.
Yeah, and to be able to say, hey, listen, our books are full for the next month is like any restaurateur's dream, where we would have nights, on a Tuesday, Wednesday, it's slow. I think we went in on a Thursday, and there was a couple that had flown in from LA just to eat that menu.
Oh, wow.
It was
which
their
is
second time.
so key. The fly-ins, the tourism. I think that was the other big takeaway I had from last year when the Michelin Guide first came to Colorado was like the tourism agencies paid Michelin to come here. And a lot of it was about attracting international travelers because they spend more.
When you put it that way, Paul, it reminds me of Visit Denver and other entities in the state that are doing boost tourism. And it's kind of like any other industry. There is a lot of not backroom money, but there's money going into pushing Denver as a food city or a music city or an art city. And it's really just like anything else in like any other industry.
A business improvement district in a neighborhood. You know, they're all pooling resources so they can have more trees in the neighborhood.
Better signage.
A restaurant industry would do this. In this case, I thought when I was revisiting this whole thing last year, like sometimes it feels like a conspiracy. Sometimes it's just like this. But like ski resorts pitched in to get the Michelin Guide to come to Colorado, which I didn't realize. That is so funny to me.
Think about ski town economics. If you've got a restaurant nearby, people are going to come to ski or go to that and ski.
To be able to say we have a Michelin-starred restaurant just down the street from the resort that you can come to, like you're going to get the Davos crowd coming to Aspen even more often than they probably do. I don't know if Aspen is cool for those people right now. Is it? I don't know.
Jake, rich people? I don't know.
This is my thing. These are my people.
That's why you're here. Yes.
It's what are we looking to attract? And it is these like hyper rich people that go, oh, there's a new Michelin. I have to eat it because they collect them like their trinkets.
Yeah, they're Pokemon.
Yeah, they put them in their little like kitschy cupboard, only they're filled with like platinum spoons.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. It's kind of like seeing a show at Red Rocks. Everybody wants to see a show at Red Rocks. But Jake, the reason we wanted to talk to you was you wrote this pretty scathing take for Westward about BRUTØ, which is one of these restaurants. What's your beef with BRUTØ?
I don't have a beef with BRUTØ. Immediately, it's so funny. I feel like the old like Simpsons episode where Homer becomes a food critic and he's like too nice for a minute, and then the moment he says something negative, the chefs literally plot to kill him. Like, I think we've reached this point where we have been viewing food so much through the eyes of influencers lately who prioritize access over anything, and that as eaters, we have become inured to photos of food and not the consumption of food itself.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I want to talk about that a little bit later. Paul, you mentioned this, the move of the Michelin star from criticism to sort of boostering, and that influencer impact is also part of this. There's in industries across everything, the critic is being removed and the influencer is being put in there.
I mean, essentially, Michelin has decided to become an influencer.
Yeah.
There is not
I think they said the writing on the wall.
There's not that big a difference from putting out a food guide and accepting money from the restaurants you feature to the influencers who allow themselves, to get paid to go make a pretty post about a BRUTØ or a Bosque or a Becken or one of the other 4-letter B restaurants that seem to be so good here.
But Jake, let's just dig in. I don't want to like bury the lead here. What did you say about BRUTØ, or what was your take? What did you think about the experience you had?
So I wanted to take my wife out. It was our 2-year anniversary. Nice dinner, right? Like a really, really special dinner. She's been working incredibly hard lately. And I had heard about BRUTØ. I actually told somebody to not go there before I even knew about it. I was like, what is this place? No, don't go. I've never heard of it before. 2 weeks later, they got a Michelin star. So he was visiting from out of town and nonplussed with my recommendation. So I was like, let's go out. And we just walked away from the experience going, wow, they're trying so hard, but it felt like they really prioritized sustainability, which is a goal that I admire, but that comes at the expense of the food at times.
Say more about that.
Sure. So what they try and do is really specialize in zero waste, that nothing gets thrown away, which means that you are having parts of a pea repurposed into the dessert. Like every atom of this pea is utilized somewhere throughout the course of the dinner, not always in places that I think make sense or that feel extra. And at some point you have to go, is putting all of this energy into saving a minute part of a pea husk really worth it? Like, what is our sustainability goal at this point?
Paul, you've been to BRUTØ.
Well, I went before the new chef. I think that's the key.
Good for you.
The story,
fair point.
It was great. I mean, I didn't have the similar experience to you. I had a very consistent, refined experience that I thought was great. I mean, it was extremely expensive, and everyone's going to have their own value judgment. But I think the story is like, this guy, Michael Diaz de Leon, had been bouncing around Denver for a while. He's the chef. And then he got an opportunity with this restaurant group, Id Est, which is run by Kelly Whitaker. And they're very popular here in Denver. They have a lot of restaurants.
Totally.
And then during the pandemic, Michael Diaz de Leon worked his tail off round the clock to produce something that was just like a singular vision of a sustainable and like a heritage, grains and masa from Mexico, pan Latin American cuisine, expressing something personal, but also some respect for food sourcing. And then they got the Michelin star and he left because it was so much work. And you hear this from a lot of chefs that get the Michelin star. And then BRUTØ, Id Est, brought in this new chef that I think you experienced, Jake.
Sure.
Byron Gomez.
Yeah, and noted football fan Paul Karolyi will understand
Thank
that.
you. Yes,
it's like you win the Super Bowl and then you have to bring in a new coach, and all of a sudden they're stuck with maybe some players that they didn't draft, and so they're thinking, okay, how do I put these pieces together? And I am a huge fan of Byron Gomez. Don't get me wrong, like on Top Chef, I think that he is an incredibly talented chef. I just think that some of the quote unquote players that he has been saddled with maybe don't play to his strengths, and that he hasn't had the time that Michael Diaz de Leon did to really cultivate this singular vision. He got thrown in there and said, figure out how to make it work in a year. And I just don't know that he's there yet. No knock on him.
Yeah. That is interesting, though, that so much of these restaurants can be driven by the chef. It's the chef themselves.
Well, I think that's what's so
everything.
That's something that's so special about it too. Is like when you have someone's vision, it's like an artist. Like someone putting art on the plate. And that's something that's so interesting about food right now is we have these auteurs. I mean, it's a little bit, maybe 10, 15-year-old idea. Anthony Bourdain kind of created this moment where chefs are rock stars. But to be able to have to step in and execute someone else's vision in a restaurant where your job is also to feed people, to sustain their biological beings, like that's the central tension, I think, here is like food is art now, but food is still sustenance.
I don't think you're sustaining people with the P.
Yeah. Well, you look at their mission, and there are so many things that I believe the restaurant group has tried to kind of carry over into bridging old BRUTØ to new BRUTØ. So you have a lot of lacto fermentation. You have this focus on, Colorado milled grains, these things that feel like at times they're shoehorned into dishes, where on the flip side, you have, this very the panoptic gaze that is the oven, the very known overseer that looms over the entire space, but it's very seldomly used in this menu. I mean, it's massive, but so little of the menu feels a la minute. It feels like a lot of cold courses. You get the, sourdough piatas that come out of there, and it's one of the highlights of the meal because they're using the space that they're in.
Yeah, you were like, the bread here rules. And I was like, so does at the Olive Garden. So I'm understanding this a little bit more.
And there it's unlimited. At BRUTØ, they ask you to pay for more bread.
This episode is brought to you by the Colfax Avenue Business Improvement District. Come on down to Denver's most iconic street, Saturday, September 7th for the 2024 Colfax Crawl. This bar crawl is like none other, with 5 unique tracks to suit your taste. Beer lovers, dive bars, mocktails, queer bars, and wine and cocktails. Enjoy exclusive specials at popular spots like Bar Max, Brews Off Facts, The Squire, the newly opened Champagne Tiger, and more. I can't wait to go to Champagne Tiger, to be honest with you. What's their theme? Bougie Ratchet? Me. If there's a sober version of Bougie and Ratchet, it's me. Gather your crew and experience Denver's nightlife like never before. Because this is more than a bar crawl. It's a Colfax adventure. This event is poppin', so be sure to secure your spot before it sells out. Get your tickets now at multipass.com/ColfaxCrawl2024. That's multipass.com/ColfaxCrawl2024.
Hi, this is David, the CEO of CityCast. Do you ever find yourself holding back on travel because you're afraid of a language gap? Well, mind the gap no longer, as long as you have Babbel. Babbel is the science-backed language learning app. Its 10 minutes lessons are quick and handcrafted to get you talking your new language in 3 weeks. So I was reminded in the Olympics how much I love French. I had spoken French as a kid, but it has deteriorated to nothing. But I thought I would love to take a trip back to France with my girlfriend, but I'm embarrassed because my French is at 0. And I thought, why don't I get on Babbel and revive my French? And it's been a joy for the past few weeks. I'd forgotten everything. I'd forgotten plurals. I'd forgotten articles, vocabulary. Mostly I'd just forgotten how to speak and how to listen. And Babbel has me back on track with lots of speaking and lots of listening, because that's how you get better at a language. So I've been working on time, for example. And there's this way in French where when you say 2:45, you don't say 2:45, you say 3 o'clock minus 15. So, je rentre à 3h moins le quart. I'm coming back at 2:45. Anyway, it's so much fun to speak. And don't take my word for it. There's studies from Yale, from Michigan State University that prove that Babbel works. So here's a special limited time deal for CityCast listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/citycast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/citycast. Spelled BABBEL.com/citycast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Let's talk about the price, though. You mentioned you and your wife had dinner and it cost you $755, which is like half of my mortgage payment. So, but it gets to this issue that I don't know, that it's confusing to me with these awards. Is like, is this supposed to be a big deal to the average person who maybe can't access this type of restaurant, or is it just really for rich people and other chefs?
So I do want to clarify that if you just did the dinner, no drinks, right? The base it comes out to about $320 with gratuity. There's a 22% included grat in there.
So it's a little bit more comparable maybe to a nice dinner somewhere that's not a Michelin star.
Right.
Price-wise.
You add on like any drinks at that point, and then, the upcharge for your optional bread that you do want to take home.
Yeah, we definitely got a second order of bread when I went. It was great.
Exactly. And so you come out of this and you go like, I truly believe that a nice dinner can be equivalent to a vacation. You are transported for hours somewhere else. And that, we're fortunate enough that we get to travel a lot for work. And so this was like, how do we do something in the middle of our hectic schedules
that feels like a vacation?
Right. And that is a way to celebrate our anniversary in a special way. And I think that what instead you get, at least in this experience, was that you were spending this money to feel really good about sustainability and all of the efforts that go into creating a zero waste restaurant without necessarily that translating to your taste buds. Now, I'm not saying that like we should have just gone to Cheesecake Factory and ordered one of everything on the menu. That wouldn't have been a qualitative better experience.
No.
But like, I also don't think I should leave an 11-course dinner going, I could eat.
I'm hungry.
Yes.
I'm hungry. Paul, you brought up value judgment earlier. What do you think about this type of restaurant and related to cost and experience?
Well, that's the whole thing for me is value. We've been talking a lot about the cost of living in Denver recently, how everything feels like it's too damn expensive. It's too expensive to live here. Everyone's leaving. And so when you think about a restaurant and value, it's a different kind of calculation than just like going for the best of the best. Like aspiring for a Michelin star for these chefs, like trying to achieve something really special, to be the Picasso of a kitchen. That's maybe that's worth something more. Maybe that costs more. That costs a lot in terms of like where you get the ingredients, the training that goes into it. That's a lifetime of experience. Whereas like good value in a restaurant is very different and very different for a customer. And like those are the kind of restaurants that most people go to most of the time. I think a BRUTØ is a very rare experience because it's so specialized.
It's almost like the vacation.
Yeah,
I like that.
That was
metaphor.
a good metaphor.
That's
but
really
like
helpful.
Good value at a restaurant. That's why I like the Michelin Star's new Bib Gourmand category. I think that's a much more interesting list of winners. And that was also part of their change in business model because they don't want to have this tension between like giving out more Michelin stars in more areas and then diluting the meaning of a star because their whole value is this exclusivity. So they have these new categories where they can give themselves the opportunity to recognize more restaurants in the regions that pay them to come. and also be a little bit more useful for people.
And maybe put a little bit of respect on those types of restaurants that are still doing wonderful work, but they're serving a different clientele. And they're, I don't want to say doing it for different reasons, but it may be a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. I think somewhere like La Diabla, my favorite restaurant in town right now, like they have a loyal customer base that comes back every Thursday for the pozole deals. You know, they have a great happy hour deal. They have a community. That's how you run a sustainable restaurant, is you bring back regulars. You know, somewhere like BRUTØ, what they're relying on is those international tourists coming once every 5 years and telling their rich friends.
Or the local person who this is their one big thing this year.
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to go buy tickets to this we're not going to get the usual, you know, once a year we do a front row tickets to a show. Instead, this year we're doing a dinner at BRUTØ.
Yeah, or Paul gets his 50-yard line tickets to a Broncos game.
And Paul's dreams. Paul's dreams.
I think one of the interesting things was that the feedback I received, more so than anything disagreeing with what I wrote, was just my ability to write it. That people did not believe that I was in any way qualified to eat there. Like one of, the chef's...
That's so rude to me.
That's weird.
One of the chef's friends, harassed me on Instagram and, insulted my wife in my DMs. And, it's, the level... This guy on Reddit was like, I'm sorry, but you writing about Magic the Gathering doesn't qualify you to do this. And I'm like...
You're like, excuse me, versatility? Excuse me?
It's that fine dining is being so gatekept. And so it's not for the people that want to talk about the experience they had once a year, because if you don't like it, you didn't get it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's also the same for music.
Yeah. Same.
It's like, you don't like Can, you don't get it. I'm like, I always thought Can was boring. I'm sorry. I don't want to listen to that record. You know what I mean? It feels the same.
I'm done explaining 100 gecs to my friends.
Right.
It's fine.
Right. It's something that's so interesting, because I did want to talk to you about the response that you got. And, we're all people that people call it content. We put out work into
Are you a comment reader?
I mean, no, actually, I'm not. Paul is a comment reader, and I am not a comment reader.
Oh, yeah? Okay, yeah. Jake's offering me a high five. We can do that later.
But where does that play into this? Does that even matter? I don't know. Do you think? Do the chefs look at... They have to look at these things. They have to look at, your work.
My wife went out to dinner last night with someone whose partner had recently opened a restaurant, and what they said was, I am dying for him to eat our food. I'm terrified of what he would say. I think that just goes back to this feedback loop of we have influencers who need to portray everything as good, and then people want to go to the capital G good restaurants, and nobody wants to talk about what the food is because access is so important. And being able to go there, be seen there, take your nice photos. I think that what chefs really crave is honest feedback, not just mean for the sake of mean. And if there's anything that somebody disagreed with in my review, I am open to that. I'm open to seeing where we were wrong point by point. But just this idea that food is intrinsically going to be good and it's all a matter of opinion. Sure. But I don't think that my opinion was invalid in any way.
Well, the thing is, it is subjective though. And that's part of the fun of it. You go in, you hype yourself up for an experience like BRUTØ. I remember when I went with my parents and my wife, it was a special occasion. We wanted to go out to a nice place. We all got a little bit dressed up for it. The service was an event. Phenomenal. It was an event. You got to, of course, you want to look good. A place like this is very fancy, but Denver doesn't have enough places that you can go and dress up and feel that way about it. But yeah, we got ourselves hyped for it. And then we put ourselves in the mindset of enjoying it. And we did. We had a fantastic experience. And that was part of us bringing that to it. We played a part too. So I think, restaurants, you can do that. You can choose whatever experience you want to have to an extent.
Because you talked about the service too, Jake. You're you don't get a Michelin star for service, but the service was phenomenal.
We really love the service. Alan, if you're listening, I love you.
I was trying to how could I find Alan? Yeah, I want to see who Alan is.
Alan claps back at the next episode. No, and we didn't go in there with the intention of writing anything. My editor, the inimitable Molly Martin over at Westward, saw my stories and we just started talking about this. She goes, I want to hear this, but on the page, because I was very unfiltered about this. And there aren't technically Michelin stars for service, but obviously it plays a part. Like we would be kidding ourselves.
They're the stewards of it.
Right. And for a Michelin star, there were things that they missed. Like, my silverware wasn't remarked after a course. That's something I feel like a Michelin star restaurant should be expected to nail every time. There was, something that was like an inedible chunk in my dumpling, or several inedible chunks. And there was this big huddle in the kitchen about them trying to determine what it is. And I'm just like, here, take the chunks. I've got the evidence right here.
You got somebody fired, Jake. But I don't know. This is it. I'm thinking, I don't know. I'm thinking a lot about the service component now too. But let's go back to the Michelin of it all. Like, sure. What do you both think about Colorado finally being on the radar of this big thing that says we're important in a certain way?
It's still murky to me how it came here. Did the Colorado Tourism Board reach out to the Michelin Guide and say, hey, we would be interested in paying you some money in order for you to make a guide to our area? Or did the Michelin people reach out and say, we have identified Colorado as a great dining destination, and if you only give us a little bit of money, we would be happy to come and review some of your restaurants? I still don't know where that started. I've been trying to figure that out, and I don't know. But I think that's pretty important. As for what it says about our dining scene, not much. I think it's really more about like restaurants relative to other restaurants in our region. Because I don't think, you go to BRUTØ, that's not going to compare to a one-star restaurant in France. I just don't think you can make that fair comparison. These markets are different. Expectations are different. Culture is so different.
Paul sounds like a comment guy now, because a lot of people are like, go eat a star in Portugal. It'll be like double the courses and half the price.
Yeah,
it's very
exactly.
true. This is a great point.
It's just like within Colorado, within the regions that they have deigned to review, that where the tourism boards and ski resorts have paid them enough money, I think it's a really fun thing to talk about and a component of our food world that's fun to consider and think about how you make your dining decisions. But to me, it's not worth much more than that.
On the flip side, if we take all of the financial implications out of this, all of the backroom scheming and conspiracies that Paul always trades in.
My favorite.
I think that anything that brings chefs like Michael Diaz de Leon, Byron Gomez, that caliber of chef, and that people can start working up through Denver's scene,
absolutely,
a net win for us. And honestly, I know how much that restaurants struggle in this city. So just getting to be a little bit more of a dining town, I think, is critical, because I feel like New Denver is searching for identity in so many ways. And I think that food is so important to a city. And that one thing that BRUTØ really did incredibly well was incorporate Colorado into the menu. You see the love for our state right there on the plate. And so to be able to cultivate that and bring in or have a goal for chefs to aspire to in our city is very important.
100% agree. This was a lingering quote from, again, last year's whole kerfuffle around this, from Bo Peritko, the chef at Molotov Kitchen and Cocktails, one of my favorite restaurants in the city. I would give them a bib gourmand if it was my choice. But he was like, it's kind of bullshit, but also it's a clarion call, for the chefs here to step up your game. Try a little bit harder, be a little bit more ambitious.
Well, and everybody wins when that happens, when the game is stepped up. And I think this is part of the missing component of a lot of these worlds of art and music and food, is when we don't have the critical eye, we don't always get the fire under our ass to do better. And sometimes Denver has really struggled with that. Been like, we don't need to criticize anybody. We're doing great. And like, well, maybe our art scene could do a little bit better because we're not competing with anyone. And I think that's a great point, Paul.
Yeah, it matters if you decide it matters. If you decide that the Michelin star matters to you.
At the end of the day.
If we see the same kind of like 925 reservations in 36 hours after the awards are distributed on Monday, then we'll know that it matters to people and that it's valuable and that it's working.
And that's good for our economy. I mean, at the end of the day, I guess my last question for you guys would be, if you could pitch a category to Michelin that you would like to rate or judge or be something that they think about when they look at restaurants, what would that be? Paul, I mean,
do you have one, Bree? I want to hear what you think about this. You haven't said anything.
Well, because I mean, honestly, I told you this. I've only been to this style of restaurant when I know the chef who's hooked me up. Like, I would never pay for this. But I guess to me, I think you know this about me. I love atmosphere.
Yeah.
I like a good experience. I think that restaurants sometimes severely lack in like thinking about a comfortable chair that like looks cool, and the light. I like lighting, and I like intentional music. I hate when you walk in and you're like, why are they blaring, like My Chemical Romance? Love them. Love them. It's too loud, and it's not what I want to hear while I'm enjoying it. You know what I mean? Like, when the music doesn't match, that's what I would look at. Is
you want the vibe?
The vibe. I want to, and I want
this
the real.
This is my pitch. Best vibes.
Is it?
Vibes category.
And I have terrible taste in vibes. So, like, what would you say?
Poppies. We agree about Poppies. Poppies deserves a Michelin star for vibes.
I haven't.
Well, it's a steak house in a strip mall, and it's like an old piano bar. It's dark. It's
great leather booths.
They have rice. They serve rice pilaf, so this is a fancy place.
the best chocolate chip cookie in the city. You get a bag of them for $6 on the way out.
Is this like in the mold of a like Bastion's Columbine style steak?
It's kind of in between those two.
Okay, great.
I would say, because it's also just a great bar to go watch a football game. Surprisingly, weirdly enough, isn't that weird about it? It's because it's very dimly lit, but there's TVs, and they took the piano out. Unfortunately, you used to be able to sit at the piano. It was a bar. It was amazing, but it it's like mid-price. It's between those two things, price point wise, and it's just kind of, I don't know. It's in a strip mall, so you can't.
Great vibes. Domo would be another one.
Oh,
the Japanese oasis. Like,
Domo,
I don't know.
There is nothing.
It's not like Michelin style. Like, I don't know what the inspectors would think about a place like that.
But
I think they would refuse the award too.
I know Gaku Homo would be like, sorry, we can't accommodate that kind of level of fanaticism, because he's like kind of a slow foodie guy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I could see, but I think he could also get an award for just like intent, how he approaches the restaurant business.
I think the Michelin people would say, like, we do think about this, Like, I think because there's this famous thing about Michelin inspectors that they'll put a fork on the floor when they're coming through to test a place out. They'll just like take a fork from the table and they'll put it on the floor, and they'll test to see how long it takes for it to get picked up.
I do that as well, but just so the fork reaches its maximum flavor potential.
Oh my God. That sounds so offensive to me. Like, let's go see who picks this up. But maybe it's a good point. It's like, who's paying attention to the experience?
Yeah.
Oh, I had a GM that would take all of the Splendas out of the sugar thing when you were doing like a review to see if you noticed that you needed to bring more Splendas. So
hilarious.
Weird
but
test.
The details matter for these people.
Well, we're going to be watching this we're kind of waiting with bated breath as to what Michelin decides.
Will BRUTØ lose their star? Will Frasca get a second one?
These
are the questions that some people care about.
Well, Jake, Paul, thank you so much. This was really fun.
Thanks, Bree.
Thanks, Bree.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell Byron Gomez about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye-bye. Oh boy, you should Google him. What a look. What a look. He is definitely a celeb chef. Hey, girl. Okay.